I didn't quite realize that Mr. Hefner had such drawing power. We said, oh, you know, you got a new book out. Why don't we have the Hefner Lounge is named after you? Why don't we have a few people for drinks at the Hefner Lounge? So we invited all of your friends and our Society of Fellows, and about an hour or two ago we said we better move this downstairs. Everybody in town is coming, and so...
Thank you.
A big draw. We'll all go drinking in the Hefner Lounge afterwards. After we hear about the transition to a new energy future. But you say something incorrect in your book.
Incorrect. Okay.
That you're part of 3 generations in the energy business. But it's really 4 generations now, right?
Yeah.
Give me the history, because it's your grandfather, your father, you, and now your son is
he is indeed
doing wildcatting for natural gas.
My grandfather was one of those great American stories. He was a sheep herder in North Texas. He learned to read by getting books from a cousin of his, and he was able to get into North Baptist State College, I think it was.
That's in the Panhandle?
No, it's somewhere in North Texas. And he got through that and then applied to University of Texas and graduated with a law degree. And then there wasn't any such thing as oil and gas law in those days. This was 1903, but that's when the Spindletop field came in, the first major field in America. So he went to Beaumont and hung out his shingle. My father was born there in Beaumont before they moved to Oklahoma, and he followed in the legal profession. But they both got into, my grandfather wrote some of the first mineral deeds, and he ended up a Justice of the Supreme Court of Oklahoma and was in the oil industry and the law business all of his life, as was my father. I'm a geologist from the University of Oklahoma. My son is also one of my sons is also a geologist. As I said, my other one's in IT, and he does all that for us.
Information technology for you. Well, great. And so you ended up mainly wildcatting for natural gas throughout Oklahoma, right? Which was unusual. I mean, when I was growing up in Louisiana, you'd find natural gas would be like catching a catfish. You'd want to throw it back and you just burn it off.
Exactly. No question about that. I became fascinated with natural gas when I was at the University of Oklahoma. Maybe it was because I'd been down on some of the wells while I was in college and working for my father's and grandfather's company. And oil was always spilling around and it stunk, and I never was a fan of oil. But natural gas seemed to be a clean, beautiful fuel, and so I followed that path. It was difficult financially because it's always been really difficult to make any money. It's been the byproduct, the stepchild, and so forth through all these years. But Walter, I think that's changing now.
But why was it a stepchild? I mean, you get a lot of BTUs in a clean way out of burning natural gas. Why does it always sell for about 1/3 of what a barrel of oil would in terms of BTU?
Well, there really hasn't been.
What? You'll take 1/3? Sorry, what is it, $3.34 now for MMBTUs? All right.
Well, it's been a byproduct because there's really been a very slow market, and there's never been a national policy to use it. It's never been a principal fuel, and none of our economic or energy policies have ever been positive for natural gas. As a matter of fact, at one time in 1978, the last time we had major energy legislation under Carter, because everyone thought we were running out of it, including the major oil companies, and testified so. I guess I was the Lone Ranger in Washington. I testified 18 times that we were awash in natural gas, and no one understood it. They just understood the natural gas you got with oil, but there was a lot of natural gas. So anyway, because they were afraid of the households running out and schools getting closed, they passed the Fuel Use Act. People don't know much about that, which prohibited the use of natural gas in its 2 major and fastest growing markets. New industrial facilities and power generation.
which is why we got a lot of coal plants.
Yes, we built about 100,000 megawatts of new coal plants, and that weren't needed. Natural gas was filling most of the need for new power generation in those days, and we've added about 15 billion tons of CO2 that'll be in the air for a century or so because of that bad policy. And that's what's so important about energy policy. If you don't get it right, it's going to stay with you for generations.
You know, I see Bill Mayer back there. He brought Boone Pickens last year, and Boone Pickens even seemed to think we had a shortage of natural gas. So am I misunderstanding that?
No, you're right. Boone's a great geologist. He was oil geologist, taught at Oklahoma State University. And he was good at that, but like all the oil guys, they thought we were running out of natural gas. So the original Pickens plan was to build wind simply to take natural gas out of generation so we could use it for trucks and cars. Now, that isn't necessary. Finally, I think most of the people in the United States, policy people, and certainly all the experts who know about natural gas, including myself, understand that there's over 100 years of supply of natural gas. Actually, I believe very strongly, and it's in the book, that we have a larger supply of attainable natural gas than we do mineable coal in the United States.
And we're just finding more natural gas the past couple of years, right? Big finds.
Huge finds, enormous finds. There was, as the price did rise, there was a paradigm shift because Americans are great technologists. We're great innovators. That's what we're all about. And so we figured out how to get natural gas out of rocks, the shale rocks, where enormous supplies are stashed in the United States and all over the world, actually. It'll be a game changer, a paradigm changer for the world.
You have a historical thesis, which I'd never thought about till I read your book, about starting in 1800, of moving from solids to liquids to gases. Explain the theory and why.
Okay. I think that what I call the grand energy transition is an evolutionary step forward, major step for humankind on Earth. I had many mentors, and we won't have time for all of that, but I started thinking about energy in the big picture, and instead of thinking of it as what fuel we're going to use and how much, I started thinking about it, and this was my eureka moment, I think, in energy thinking, about the form of matter. And all matter is either a solid, liquids are transitionary form of matter. There are not much of them in the universe. And gas. Gas is the largest form of matter in the universe. And once I started thinking about that, and then plotting all the fuels that were used as a percentage of the marketplace over time, I found this elegant simplicity of what I call the grand energy transition, or GET. And what basically it's showing us is that as civilization progressed, we've always demanded better, cleaner, more flexible fuels that'll do more. And then we build the technology around that. And the transition from, you can see civilization started around the wood fire. Mm-hmm. So we had solids, wood, grass, dung. And then whale oil came in, and in the beginning of the 1900s, we went to petroleum oil, which was so abundant and plentiful and a better fuel that we started that transition.
And England got kind of stuck on coal?
Yeah, they did. Within the big picture of the grand energy transition from solids to liquids to gases, then you have competing fuels. And coal put wood out of business. Coal was a better fuel. The steam engine came in. It created all the technologies around coal, allowed England and the rest of the developed world to have the Industrial Revolution, but led by England. And coal was really the fuel that England built the British Empire on. And Churchill saw that it wasn't as good a fuel, and so in about 1913 he started trying to convert the British Navy to oil. And then World War II came along, and coming out of World War II, lots and lots of additional technology was developed that could be built around oil, another better fuel, a cleaner fuel. And that sparked the next greatest uplift in human economy, which was the post-World War II growth, you might say, all the way to the globalized world. And now I think we're on the brink of another as we go from oil and coal, or really solids and liquids, to what I call the age of energy gases. And I think natural gas is the bridge fuel to the other and even cleaner gases of wind. Solar I include because it's basically a ball of hydrogen gas, and hydrogen itself. The ultimate fuel will be hydrogen, but it's going to take us 50 or 60 more years or more to get there, even though all the technology's mostly in hand.
And natural gas, as a good transition to the age of gases, seems to have two advantages. It puts out a lot less carbon, and it's a lot less dependent or zero dependence on foreign sources.
That's so important for the United States today. First, a lot less carbon is correct. I like to look at it when I can the other way around. What we've always been doing is in civilization is, you could say, decarbonizing, because wood is almost 100% carbon, coal a little less carbon and some hydrogen, oil some more hydrogen and even less carbon, and when you get to natural gas, it's a very simple molecule. It's 4 hydrogens and 1 carbon, so we're moving another step toward hydrogen. Hydrogen, of course, when it's used, you create energy, and the byproduct is basically air and water. So if you make hydrogen through electrolysis from water, you're really going from water to water.
Mm-hmm. And why don't you put solar emphasize solar in your, nuclear in your mix?
Well, nuclear's a solid as long as it's nuclear that's produced by uranium.
But you're almost getting theological. You don't like nuclear because it's a solid?
Yeah, I think
okay.
I really believe in the grand energy transition, and I think that's where humanity's going. Now, there's other problems with nuclear. Just to get it sited is a huge difficult thing. Another problem, no one wants it in their backyard, of course. My friends in Singapore say, well, if anything went wrong with a nuclear plant in Singapore, there's no Singapore left. So people feel that way about it. So siting is a huge problem. The storage of the waste is a big problem. We don't know ever what that'll cost, but it's an enormous number. And if the West, the United States and our allies, decide in this energy transition that we're going through that we're going to base everything on nuclear, well, the rest of the world will. And so the Irans of the world are going to be hell-bent to build nuclear. And proliferation will happen. And that is costly. Somebody's going to pay for the controls of not having dirty bombs at home. And none of that ever gets priced into the nuclear energy. So one of my major points in the book is that really from early on, let's just say after World War II and certainly from the 70s, we haven't priced the energy we consume at the full cycle cost. And what that does, all the economic growth that we've had post-World War II has really been leveraged as bad as the financial system was recently by consuming energy at less than its full cycle cost, because those costs will have to be paid for.
In other words, the cost meaning pouring carbon into the atmosphere, guarding the Persian Gulf sea lanes,
exactly.
Invading Kuwait, whatever it may be, is
exactly.
all costs, and the nuclear costs would be in on that. Tell me how you can get us our cars going with compressed natural gas. I mean, is that a major Marshall Plan we'd have to do? What will we do to get there?
Well, if we really wanted to do something about energy security and the money we're sending to foreign oil producers, we could. The technology's in hand. It's been around for 50 years. Automobiles run better on natural gas than they do gasoline. The internal combustion engine in your car you're driving today will run at least 3 times longer on natural gas because there's no solids and particulates in it as there are in gasoline. So I keep telling everybody there's nothing. Americans love the cars we drive. We love big cars and we like to drive fast out in the major roads and things. And there's nothing wrong with those. The problem is the tank. We build a tank that holds liquids instead of gases. Every single automobile producer in Europe produces natural gas vehicles. There's 8 million of them in the world. There's only 150,000 in the United States. And so one of the policies I advocate is that just like we did to win World War II, we really geared up and built the materials and things that we needed. And so for about $700 billion over 5 years, we could convert and retrofit half of the natural gas vehicles in America. I mean, half of the gasoline vehicles in America to natural gas. And by doing so, we would eliminate half of our oil imports in that short a time.
Well, shouldn't we? I mean, the first step, that's too expensive right now, right?
It'll save trillions as we go forward. It pays out.
But couldn't we do it at least with truck fleets, buses, public?
Step by step. However, it depends how serious we are about carbon and how serious we are about problems in the Middle East and how serious we are about energy security. Because if we are really serious about that, it's a program that's not any more expensive than stabilizing the financial system.
Cap and trade bill that's come out of the House and is languishing now. It seems to disadvantage natural gas and advantage coal. Is that right?
That's the.
Is that a smart thing? I know the answer there.
As long as you don't mind CO2 and lots of other pollution, the largest source of mercury pollution in the world and all of our streams and waters is from coal. Cap and trade sounds good. And politicians, of course, love it because you can wheel and deal. But the fine print never...
Basically, you mean in writing a cap and trade bill, there's all sorts of little goodies get thrown in by...
And in this bill, one prominent politician, who's around here often, said we should call it cap and payoff.
Who said that? Just tell us. Don't worry. We won't tell.
That was at the Aspen Strategy Group, so I can't.
Diane?
I'm bound, no.
Right.
Anyway, you can all figure it out, so I won't be quoted saying, but anyway. It was gamed. You can game it. And if we tried to do it internationally, it'd be gamed. Just think of how many nations want to protect their principal industries. And just like states will want to protect their principal industries. So cap and trade was gamed in the House, and there were so many giveaways that it actually sustains coal and penalizes natural gas, because natural gas didn't get any of those giveaways. And for instance, a compressor station on a natural gas pipeline will start having to pay the cap and trade taxes right away, where coal has all these giveaways for years and years and years.
So the best thing to do is just defeat that bill, in your opinion?
I think the Senate should start over.
Okay.
I really do.
With a cap and trade bill or just a straight carbon tax?
Well, you know, the thing that's transparent and that you can understand is a carbon tax. Carbon tax solves a big part of the problem, but it doesn't create an energy level playing field, because there's more cost to energy than carbon, and you were talking about some of them a minute ago. If you think about oil in the Persian Gulf and the loss of life and fighting oil wars and protecting the free flow of oil and the open oceans and the cost of pollution, smog in all of our metropolitan areas, those are real costs. People die, have health costs and so forth related to that. And so oil has a lot of costs that aren't just wouldn't be recognized by a carbon tax, as does coal, the same type of things. Whereas natural gas, for instance, it's domestic, it's clean, it doesn't have any of the particulates. It would eliminate
But it would
the
be
pollution.
advantaged by a carbon tax because it puts out less carbon,
Yes,
right?
it would be advantaged by a carbon tax, so it's a better way to go. I say, why not create a green tax that taxes the problem? The problem's coal and oil. And why do you want to tax natural gas, which is the solution? It doesn't make any sense to me. You tax what you want to use less of.
But wouldn't a carbon tax, even though
Yeah, it would.
be a little bit better? I mean, much better than a cap and trade,
without question.
and then just an oil tax, and maybe even a fee on imported oil if you wanted to do something that would be
A
sellable
fee on,
political.
yes, a fee on imported oil, and that's been talked about over years. And there's nothing wrong with adding a tax on imported oil. Probably the government needs the money now.
I take it you're not running for office, right?
No, I'm not running for office.
Questions, comments? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm concerned with the whole getting natural gas out of shale, with the issues in the environment in the Colorado Plateau that was done, and there was a lot to the water, the groundwater and the ground wells, and the increase of cancer. And there's been a lot of studies about what they use to get the natural gas out of the shale, that it really is harmful for us humans. So it may not go into the air, but it goes into us humans. And I think that's a bigger concern too.
It is a huge concern, and I agree with that. The studies that I've seen are different than the ones you've seen. And the fracture treatments that our company uses has about 1% of the total volume of various chemicals. And all of those chemicals that we use, at least, and I can't tell you about the Rhone Plateau for sure, but are all various chemicals that go in all sorts of household consumables, from soaps to toothpaste and things. So I know there's been a lot of talk out of the what happened here in Colorado. And I know there's been claims of people getting cancer and the pollution of groundwater. However, when you drill wells, you case off the shallow zones where all the fresh water are, and the fracture treatments are going generally at 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 or 12 or 11,000 or deeper feet, and those waters will not go up and cannot migrate up physically to the groundwater.
By the way, we should have recognized May Lee Hefner here before we started the Q&A. May Lee, good to see you.
Thank you. Well,
Yeah, was that Tori? Was that your hand up? Yeah.
Isn't there a technology, thank you, Crystal, isn't there a technology available now to treat the water that's thrown off by the drilling systems you're using? And
Well,
are you using such water treatment?
in the big shales, there's beginning to be programs, and our industry needs to improve, just like all industries, in which all the water will be recycled and treated. So that is happening, and it will happen going forward. I think what you have to look at is what are the environmental trade-offs. There will be some. You can't have a perfect system, but we can get a lot closer, I think, with natural gas. Natural gas doesn't spill on the ground. It doesn't go into the groundwaters.
Are there places that are much safer than shale? In other words, you do it in Oklahoma, do it in Texas, Louisiana, you don't have quite as many problems, right?
Well, I think that the reasons that Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, and other states, Kansas, have much less problems is because it's been regulated for a long time by the states. Okay. And the population is generally understanding of it and generally benefiting by it. The production of natural gas is a large economic benefit to local economies. It supplies a lot of money for state taxes, and much of that goes to the schools, for instance, in Oklahoma and Texas.
Do you have trouble with transport? I mean, gas?
The pipeline, this is a real important thing. People say you can't convert the automobiles because you can't fuel them. Well, the largest single fleet in the world is the 130 million automobiles in America that go almost every day to where they stay, at a home that's already heated with natural gas, 83 million homes. Oh. And there are little fill devices, no bigger than this, appliances that you can put outside your garage, inside your garage, and fill your car up at night. And so the simplest infrastructure transition would be for natural gas fueled cars.
Wait, can I go out and buy a natural gas fueled car?
It's hard. Right now, the only production model sold in the United States is the Honda GX. But so you'd probably, and you'd be on a 6-month waiting list in Los Angeles. You'd probably need to use it there. It's the only place they're selling them. But it wouldn't be hard for the ones that are produced in Europe to be sold over here and produced over here. We're certainly transforming the automobile industry at this time, no matter what. So why not transform them? Think of the work and the jobs that could be saved for the retrofitting of good old American cars that have a lot of life left in them to natural gas, because that would be done by the dealers. Half the employees in the automobile industry as a total work for dealers.
Right.
And so the dealers would do the retrofitting, the dealers would do the home installation of the appliances. Now the other thing, one other thing's on that system that's already in place, the natural gas pipeline grid. Most all major industrial facilities are already attached to the natural gas pipeline grid. And more natural gas generating capacity than coal has is already attached to the natural gas pipeline grid. So there's so much already there, it wouldn't be hard to build the rest of the infrastructure.
Yeah. Over here, and I'll catch you, yeah.
This has to do with again, cap and trade, carbon tax, CO2 emissions, their effect on the planet, on all of that. What we are told is that we now use about 65 tons per capita, and that we have to reduce that by 80% by 2050. And with population growth, that comes to about 2 tons per person per year. Is what you're telling us consistent with what we're being told by the people who say that if we don't do that, there will be a catastrophe in sea rise and glacial melting and all of the things that we're being told? Or do you disagree with that vision, either one of them?
I don't disagree with the vision, and I'm probably not smart enough to understand the climate science to say we've got to reduce it specifically by so much. However, the one thing I know is there's no other scalable way to reduce CO2 emissions in the largest CO2 producing economy in the world, our country, than faster way than by scaling up natural gas use. Nothing else can scale up that fast. So if they are right, as the IPCC, the International Panel, says, if they are right about the timing, then the only way you can fight that timing would be the scale up of our own natural gas resources.
Which doesn't slow down growth the way some other cap and trade things would do.
Well, I can make the case that if we actually did this, that natural gas, the conversion to energy gases, natural gas, wind, solar, and hydrogen, would begin to spur the next greatest ever economic expansion, just like happened when coal displaced wood and just like what happened when oil displaced coal. I think the same thing will happen again when gases displace oil and coal.
At the beginning of your remarks, you, I think, said there's a 100-year supply of natural gas, and to make that statement, you have to make two assumptions, and one is how much natural gas is available, but the other one is what it's used for. And so, when you say 100 years, do you assume that natural gas would be used, for example, to power all the automobiles? In other words, what on the use side are your assumptions to say 100-year supply?
The over 100-year supply is based on current numbers by most of the experts that have done the resource analysis. I think they're all too small. Their numbers are, say, around 2,000 trillion, and we're consuming about 23 trillion right now. And so the 100 years is based on today's consumption. If we scale up to do what I'm talking about, if we got rid of a third of our old coal plants, all those coal clunkers, if you will, we ought to have a cash for coal clunker program.
We do. It's called cap and trade, but they're giving the cash to the coal
They're
clunkers.
giving them the cash. That's right. If we did that, and if we converted at least half our automobile fleet, we'd have to be up to about 33 or 4 trillion a year. And my number for America is 3,000 trillion. And I think I'm conservative in that number. So I still think there's about 100 years supply. But we have plenty. We have more than we need to use, because we will be the next transition. Natural gas is the bridge fuel. The next transition is away to more wind, more solar, and more hydrogen. And natural gas is the way to build toward the hydrogen economy, because it is hydrogen, more hydrogen than any of the other fuels, and you can phase in, even in some of the same technology, you can begin to phase in hydrogen.
Jerry? You want to pass it right back there, and then I'll just gently.
With all of the bullish thought about natural gas, why then is natural gas selling at such a low ratio to oil? In other words, the BTU, this is the lowest I've seen it. In other words, natural gas at 350 or 330, you can't drill for that in Texas. You can't make any money.
Is that is 330 below the replacement cost?
The replacement cost nationally is probably somewhere in the range of $5-6.
So
what it will require to profitably exploit these natural gas resources is somewhere, let's say, in the $7 to $8 range, and say 8 is $48 a barrel or $50 a barrel. Oil. So it's a reasonably priced fuel, and it's a domestic fuel, and it does spur our economy. What else was there? Was another part of your question?
Why is it so low?
Jerry? Oh, because we're drowning in it, and we don't have a national policy to use it.
Okay. Gentleman here. Sorry, and I'll go in the way back in a minute, yeah. I didn't mean to be favoring the front, but they get their hands up faster.
Two related questions. The amount that we have in the ground in the United States is based on known reserves, is that right? And not on speculative resources.
Well, there's always a combination. You have what's proven, which means wells that are already drilled, and what's attributable to that. And then you have what can be estimated based on what's proven. And that's the same for all resources, whether it's coal or oil.
But the other part, you've referred to the United States supply. What does the gas supply look like in China and India and in Europe? Do they have the same kind of potential that we do?
They do indeed. I don't know that China and India has yet bought it, but I went to China first in 1985 to do an analysis of their natural gas resources, and I told them then I believed, after looking at their regional geology and their production and their basins and their size of the country and the scale of the basins and all of that sort of thing, that their resource base was probably about like the U.S. Now, I know they didn't buy into it, but maybe they're beginning to learn, because there are more and more natural gas discoveries. But remember, when these shales were laid down and filled up with natural gas, it was really one large continent, Pangaea, and before they all broke apart in parts. So the same geology and the same thing exists, and so Eastern Europe, yes, has a lot. Russia will have a lot more even than what they've discovered. What I believe, and I can't prove this, but it's certainly a hypothesis that I think is a working hypothesis, is wherever there's vast supplies of coal, there's vast supplies of natural gas. Now that holds true in the United States and Australia and Indonesia, and I think it will hold true, and I keep telling the Chinese in China and in India, and it will make a big difference. But even in surrounding countries around India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, they all have lots of natural gas. Iran has lots.
Joni, and then, yeah.
What has to exist to change and educate? What has to exist to change and educate the public or the Obama administration or the Congress, or where is the gas lobbyists, you know?
Well, it's a good, very, very good question. And what has to happen, I guess, are more meetings like this. But to start with, you start at the grassroots. But there hasn't, the problem is throughout the history of the United States, because natural gas was a byproduct and and it doesn't have an industry, there's never been a lobby. There's been a very concentrated coal lobby since John L. Lewis. The oil lobby is excellent. But there hasn't been a natural gas lobby because there's a bunch of independent producers in America who have trouble getting together. Then there are people who pipe the natural gas across the country, and they have different issues and different companies. And then you have the utility distribution companies, and they have a whole set of different issues. And so there's never been a very good lobby. Hopefully that's right now, between the House bill and the Senate bill, beginning to change. We've been working very, very, very hard on that, and we've got some new great allies. One is the former Colorado Senator Tim Wirth, who I've been talking about natural gas to since he went his freshman year, 1974, in Congress was when I started that. Tim and I are still talking about it. So, and then another one is John Podesta. And John Podesta of the Center for American Progress and Tim recently wrote a brilliant paper recommending to the Senate what they do and how to scale up natural gas. So it is coming.
And recent means like 2 or 3 weeks ago, right?
Yeah, last week.
Last week, yeah.
Yeah.
This is, so it's coming. It's a good question. Yeah, right. Yes, sir.
My question concerns hydrogen. There's a lot of industrial use of hydrogen now, and it comes from separating carbon and hydrogen in natural gas.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do it, you release CO2.
Mm-hmm.
And there are reformers all over America that do this.
Mm-hmm.
And so the source of hydrogen from natural gas seems to me counterintuitive to solve the climate issue because it releases carbon. The other one is seawater. But it takes lots of energy. I mean, I'm no expert, but it takes lots of energy to make that separation. And so it struck me the only way to have lots of hydrogen that was non-carbon based you'd have to have nuclear energy to actually make that separation. Mm-hmm. Is that because when people hypothesize that hydrogen is the future, carbon free, I'm thinking, well, I know lots of hydrogen's used now and you release CO2, and then I'm thinking seawater, lots of energy to make the separation. So explain to me how that works.
Hydrogen from natural gas is still a better, of course, than burning coal, because there's less CO2. There's another thing that could happen. I don't know if it'll ever become economic technology or not, but it's carbon capture and sequestration. It's really just stupid to do it for coal when you can do it for, say, natural gas or the process you're talking about, making hydrogen, and have such half or less the amount of CO2 produced as with coal. It might be commercial if you don't have to handle such vast quantities as you would with coal, but a natural gas power generation plant with sequestration and carbon capture would be about as clean as wind and solar. So there are some technologies that will come along in the meantime to be that clean. Now, how do we eventually get to the hydrogen economy? Well, the Grand Energy Transition says it's going to be with fusion, because fusion is basically the sun in a box, and that is a way to produce all the hydrogen you want out of seawater. Now, whether we get there or not, I don't know, but I recommend that we should accelerate our R&D on nuclear fusion.
Yeah, to get
not fission. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes, in the back. I see a hand there.
It seems that the automobile industry is really focused on hybrid technology and electric technology, and we're putting so much money into that. It seems unlikely that they'd make a switch to natural gas. But when you have a hybrid car, you have an electric engine, you have to get that electricity from somewhere. It just doesn't come from the air. And of course, another alternative is to fund the power plants with natural gas to supply the electricity. What do you see happening first? The power plants being supplied by natural gas, where the car is being converted to natural gas?
Well, we can do so much so quick by switching our electric generation further toward natural gas. If there's 450,000 megawatts of natural gas capacity already built and on the line. And that compares to coal with 330,000 megawatts. The difference is that we run the coal at about 75% of capacity, and we're only running the natural gas at about 40% of capacity, but it could go to 90% without any problem. Well, because of the complex regulation and the way utilities make money there and the pricing, they're going to be making more money by running the coal plants than they are the natural gas plants. And that's part of carbon pricing and so forth. As long as we don't care how much we pollute or how we tear up mountains to get more coal, it will be cheaper. So that's a part of pricing. But we could eliminate about a third of the coal plants just by gearing up and running the natural gas fired electricity first where possible. Now, you're right about the automobile industry. Unless the government takes a major step and decides it's going to have an industrial, we decide we're going to have an industrial policy to gear up and do this, it will happen over a long, long time to convert to trucks and automobiles. Trucks will be first rather than automobiles, but I think automobiles ought to be first because it's simpler and at the same time it could take a major, major step forward getting us out of the clutches of the Middle East for the next 2 or 3 decades.
Yes, back there, sir.
Thanks, Jerry.
Could you give us a breakdown when you take the fact that you got to take coal, you got to transport it, you got to take oil, you got to refine it and then transport it, and you got to take natural gas and just push it through a pipeline. Can you give us the overall carbon when you take those things into account too, the carbon difference between coal, gasoline, and natural gas?
When you put in the transport costs.
Yeah. I don't know. There's probably been some good studies on that, but your logic is right. You're burning carbon-based fuels to do the transportation. You're burning carbon-based fuels to do the refining in the case of gasoline. You're protecting the free flow of the oil around the world with the use of a lot of oil. Natural gas comes straight out of the ground with very little that has to be done with it. You have to, wells will often produce some water, and you got to get rid of that water and recycle it back into the ground. And sometimes natural gas has some sulfur with it, and you've got to crack the sulfur out. But other than that, on spot almost, you put natural gas in pipelines, and it goes to your home, and you cook with it. Mm-hmm. So and that's another point that I'd like to make before we close, is in that existing system, another thing we can do, the natural gas is so flexible. It can go to micro-generation anywhere in cities or places that need sustained amounts of electricity. If you want to be on your electric system 24/7 without, and need to be without brownouts, we're going to have more of those. Our grid system's in terrible shape. If we go to electric cars without first dealing with the grid system, we're going to have even more blackouts and brownouts. So natural gas can actually simply, in microsystems, go to your home. I have a generator up here in Starwood that I don't use often enough, but whenever the power is knocked out, it goes on and immediately I'm generating.
Well, from now on, we'll use it and geothermal to heat our buildings here.
Yeah,
I will insult you slightly by apologizing to the crowd, which is, with all due respect, I didn't think you were going to draw something that would fill up this entire room and have people standing up. We would have put this in the music tent if we had known you were such a draw. But so I'm glad to have you all here. Thank you very much. A few things to say. Wait.
I think this book is available somewhere.
It's available right upstairs for sale.
And it's dedicated to my wife, May Lee, because without May Lee pushing me, it never would have been done.
And for those, I'm going to go have a beer at the Hefner bar.
So feel free to say. I see people here have not been here much and stuff. Feel free to come to our things. Talk to Crystal Logan if you want our calendar, although we're pretty much at the end of the season. Have dinner upstairs at Plato's, a drink at Hefner's Bar. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Walter. Thank you. And here's your little packet, which I don't know if you want, but you can. Hi.